We have a great panel lined up here. We got some security experts. We really look forward to hearing what their thoughts are, talking about the future of ransomware. Let me just introduce them briefly, and just as a note, if you want to check out their full bio and their company, it's all listed on the FutureCon website right under the name. Click on bio, it'll expand. You could also connect in with them on LinkedIn, so that way you guys can chat a little bit more, pick up the conversation if there is interest in there. So I encourage you to please do that. So just to mention our panelists here. First, we have Tina Gravel. She's the SVP of Global Channels and Alliances at Appgate. So we welcome her to the panel discussion here. We have Kimberly Johnson. She's the VP of Product at BioKey, very interesting company there doing authentication and access management. And then we have John McWilliams. He's the virtual CTO at CMIT Solutions. So certainly we welcome you all to this discussion. Thank you for joining. And again, just as a reminder, please check out their bios and reach out to them, connect up on LinkedIn afterwards, and that way you guys can continue the conversation, learn about all the great stuff that they're doing there. Well, to get us kind of to set the stage, I want to talk a little bit here about ransomware, just to give us some context, and then we're going to talk specifically to our panelists. And just a couple thoughts to get our wheels spinning here. How bad of a problem is ransomware right now? Well, probably all of us that are listening are saying, yikes, it's pretty bad, because we hear about it every day in the headlines. It doesn't end. Every single day we hear about ransomware. And just to put it in perspective again, there's over 4,000 ransomware attacks each and every day in the United States. In fact, it was reported recently, ransomware attack will occur every 11 seconds in 2021, as reported by Cybercrime magazine. The average downtime after a ransomware attack, it's amazing. It's 21 days. How devastating that could be. Certainly helps you think. And in 2021, here's a stat that I tend to follow. The largest ransomware payout was made by an insurance company at $40 million, setting a world record. That was reported by Business Insider there. So now let's turn to the experts. This is kind of gloom and doom, these statistics, when we read about it, it makes us think, but there is some positive things, and we're going to look forward thinking a little bit, thinking about ransomware, where it is and where it's going. So maybe to start us off there, thinking about prevention. And prevention is so important. And maybe we could focus this to start with, maybe Kim, get your thoughts. Kim, how should organizations work to prevent ransomware attacks?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, that's a world record I never want to be part of or break or win. So just to be clear, you don't want to be on that list. And so I always approach the subject, and there's tons of resources out there nowadays, right? CISO is a great resource. They have an amazing ransomware guide that gives detailed step-by-step. My goal today was kind of just help highlight some of those things, obviously with the three of you as well. I break it down in kind of two spaces. One is prevention, and then the other one is response. And so from a prevention perspective, the place I actually started, having been in risk at one point, I always thought cybersecurity and risk were the same thing. Probably, absolutely not.
Right.
It's a, crazy concept, is assess your risk. If you don't know where your risk is, and you don't know what's critical to your business and the impact of an attack, and your third party risk is huge nowadays, right? What's your supply chain look like? Then how do you prepare? How do you act? How do you respond? And so that's where I always start, is between risk assessment and policy creation. So making sure you understand how your policies then drive that mitigation of risk. That's really the name of the game. A recent risk study just came out that cyber risk in the United States tops all other risk: hurricanes, natural disasters, right? Pandemic. Yes. It tops it. And so we have to assess risk first to know our environment. And then there's a lot of things from prevention that's been either old hat cybersecurity tricks we just haven't mastered yet, and some new things. And so backup and recovery, right? These are some highlight. Absolutely have backups and recovery. Have them offline, have them in the cloud, but test them. I can't tell you how many people have backups and they never go back to them, or update or refresh, or how are you making sure you can actually do this? And Some of the companies I've worked with do mock recovery scenarios to see if they can get through it, which I think is a fantastic idea. The other thing is vulnerability and patching. A company I used to work with, we used to look at vulnerabilities and patching cadences of companies. I'm telling you, the average vulnerability is about 4 years that it takes us to patch them. That's 4 years we're spreading that vulnerability and that risk, right? And we're now all connected in this world. And so it's kind of like a pandemic. It's like if you have the vaccine for this and you're working on these things to eradicate this problem, patch, work on your cadence, get scanning tools in place so you can identify those vulnerabilities faster and shut them down. And then the other thing I would say is whether you believe in zero trust, whether you believe in least privilege, whatever you want to believe in, we've really come to terms with perimeters are gone. We don't have perimeters. And please put multi-factor on everything. Put multi-factor authentication on every single account. That's the CEO to the intern to any system. We've seen these attacks come from abandoned accounts that were years old. And so multi-factor is becoming much more affordable. It's much more flexible. There's a lot of options out there. It doesn't have to be phone-based, as we've seen. It doesn't have to be hardware tokens, right? And so make sure you put it in place and give people options so that they adopt it. I'm a big proponent of security doesn't work if it's not adopted, right? If people are working around it. Yeah.
That's right.
We saw in the UK, NHS, doctors were cutting their cards off, their proc cards to get into the network and hot gluing them into the readers. So like if your people don't want to adopt it, it's not going to work. But we've gotten to a point, MFA is mainstream. There's a lot of options out there. We're one of those vendors, there's a sea of us out there that give you affordable, effective options. So please put multi-factor down. And then the last thing I'll say, and then, please chime in, Tina, John, Scott,
Sure.
Is train people. I even had a talk, I run marketing at BioKey. I had a talk with my team today that it's their responsibility to keep us out of the news. You have to know how to do this, especially now that we're all working from home. Security, a lot of times it's a change management, right? How many times have we talked to some folks out there that just say, well, I haven't implemented it because so-and-so doesn't want to adopt it, or it's an extra step they don't want to do. And if they don't understand the implications from a business perspective, not an IT perspective, then they're not going to adopt it. If you tell them you don't want to be putting us in the news and hurting our reputation and our revenue, that builds a little bit more ownership. And I think everybody in the organization, now that we're remote, has to own it. So that's the main pieces I'd say from prevention, from response. The last thing I'll say is have a cyber incident response plan.
Yes.
Have it detailed, know who you communicate, right? I just read an amazing article and sad article, and maybe everybody's seen it out there with the lawsuit that's now coming.
Yes. The baby. Yeah.
That is a fundamentally huge change. And the outcome of that lawsuit, I'll be watching, I bet everybody will be, is like negligence and not having these things in place and not communicating, right? The doctors now being criticized for not communicating to the patient that they were under a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
Communication and incident response plan is the other part I'd say is key.
When first of all, that you just said so many great things, Kim. I have to agree with everything that you've said. We are fighting against major corporations that are doing this. I mean, people don't realize that there is ransom as a service now. Ransomware companies out there that do this work are now outsourcing themselves to other bad guys or girls. I mean, to me, that should tell you that you better get your house in order. Scott, when you did the recap of what was going on, that was something I was going to add, because if that doesn't scare you, nothing else should. The people that are running these firms, and they are firms, are as good as any other corporation in terms of public speaking, in terms of running things. They are formidable. And if you do not have your house in order, as simple as locking the door. I mean, there's no surprise that I'm interested in zero trust. That's what Appgate does. I'm not going to give you a commercial here. But zero trust, people get confused by what this is. It's simply trust no one and set up security, contextual security parameters that way. It's not hard to do. It's a noisy marketplace right now, so I can understand why CIOs would be confused and why it would seem audacious and difficult, but it's not. It's the first line of defense. You have to look at where these corporations are breaking in and then lock these places down, whether it be email, whether it be your front door with social engineering, whether it be through your network, all and endpoints. All of these areas have to be examined. You have to have a plan, as Kim said, and you have to put your act, in gear. And I didn't say the swear I was going to, but I didn't. This is the way we have to live now. We have a global pandemic around cybersecurity. It's not just COVID. Make no mistake, COVID simply brought us to work at home, which opened the doors even further and the attack surface even further for these corporations to open the doors even further for the bad corporations to come in. Anyway.
Yeah, you guys are both spot on. There's so many ways that we can protect ourselves from ransomware. And a couple of the tools that are out there that I think are very important are the CIS framework and the NIST framework.
NIST, yeah.
Because if you actually follow those like a Bible, you will actually be able to identify in your organization your assets, what your risks are, as was mentioned already, and how you can protect those adequately. And a lot of it, remember, begins with users and education. It was mentioned too, because most of these attacks start with a social engineering campaign, a phishing campaign. Some of it is actually hacking into your enterprise because you don't have it appropriately secured. So following these frameworks are going to be key. And what happens with so many organizations today is that they aren't really sure of what they have. They don't know their attack surface. They don't know what the risks are. As a result, they're not protecting everything. It's kind of like leaving your car with the windows down and expecting nothing to happen. We know that if everything is secured, you're a much difficult target. The ransomware folks are going to move on to somebody else who's easier. So the objective here is to harden yourself and not, it's like the M&M concept. We don't want to be hard on the outside and soft in the middle. We want to make sure that we're hard all the way through. That's why, as was mentioned, the zero trust is something clear. And that's where I think, we can't work in a vacuum. We also have to reach out to other resources that are out there. There are security experts. There are many different ways that we can make sure that our enterprise is hardened and we can leverage professionals so that we can bring everything into a level where we don't have to worry about ransomware.
Yeah, great thoughts. I just want to jump in there if I can. We got questions popping up here, so I want to throw them out, and you guys could jump in and handle it. Whoever would like to grab it, just jump in there. The first one comes from Steve. His question is: do you believe companies should be held liable if their controls are so weak or non-existent that they fall prey to ransomware attacks and data loss?
So I think. Oh, go ahead, Kimberly.
I was going to say, so I'm married to a lawyer, so I had to ask him yesterday about the hospital conversation. And in lawsuits, and what we're looking at is, if you're negligent, is it the norm? In other words, is there data out there that proves that, let's say, like a security control, like multi-factor, can prevent something like this from happening? And there are now data points that are out there that say, yes, this can be prevented with these cybersecurity controls. So when you have something like that happen, or a liability situation, and they ask you, did you put in the norm, the controls that are in place? The answer to say, well, multi-factor is somewhat adopted, or we only put it on privileged accounts, or is now becoming much more risky. The last thing I'll say on that too is, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but cyber insurance is requiring it. So yes, liability or not, you're going to get to a point, we're getting there very, very quickly, where just saying I'm not investing in it, or we're selecting what we're going to do, or a lot of times cybersecurity is looked at as insurance and not necessary and a thing you have to have. We're getting well beyond that, in terms of security, so.
My feeling is that, we all hate regulations. If you're in business, you've been in business any amount of time, you hate regulations, right? We hate OSHA, we hate having to do things, but I believe that it will become very shortly like an OSHA. We will have certain things that we will have to do because it's become so problematic. Am I for it? I don't like regulations. I can't say any more about it because I've been taught by my mother not to talk about politics, sex, or religion in these forums. But I will say that I believe it's coming. And so why not get ready now? If it's coming, why not get ahead of it? Lives are being lost. Money is being lost. Consumers are being harmed, which means politicians are going to get behind this and regulations will be formed. We already have the executive order, which says that zero trust must be. Jose is asking about, can you point to tools for the individuals to protect against ransomware without relying on vendor products? Something like NIST for the everyday person. I think NIST is for the everyday person. I think you need to go to NIST. There are common denominator things that you can do in your home that are listed there about Wi-Fi and so forth. So I would definitely do that. I would also call my cable company and my mobile phone company, and I would follow their directions about securing my own mobile phone, because ransomware is coming back to the mobile phones now. Sure. And I would also not look down on the vendors, because yes, we're here and yes, it costs money, but remember that we see thousands upon thousands of issues a day, and we are going to be your first line of defense in terms of protecting you. And so while it does cost money, once again, it's going to be a smaller fee than if you have a problem, much smaller.
So I just wanted to comment too, when we talked about accountability and whether or not it's appropriate. We know that in the privacy sector, already the CEO, or most sectors for privacy data, the CEOs or the C-level executives are already asked to sign off on controls, and they are being held legally responsible for breaches. So in essence, that's already there. And what they're doing is they're putting the pressure down on their staff to make sure that their staff is protecting the corporate assets in this particular way. And as far as tools are concerned, there is no easy button. There is no magic, this is going to stop everything. Common sense things come into play that are in the guidelines that you're going to see from this, that are in CIS guidelines. Some of the things that you can keep in mind are having a good EDR solution so that you can not only know what your assets are, looking for rogue assets that appear, monitoring what's happening in your environment, and then, of course, actioning those items. It's one of the things where we have to know what's out there. And if we see something pop up, it's not good enough to catch it a couple days later. We need to be looking at it right away. If we see increased network traffic that is happening, where is it going? What's happening? Firewalls are going to give you some protection, but you need some AI type solutions that are out there that are adapting to the threats, because the threats continue to adapt. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where it comes down to work, it's effort, but we need to make sure that we are looking at all the different elements, keeping things up to date, making sure that we're managing everything, as was mentioned, least privilege. These are all aspects that leadership has to boil down into their people to make sure that this happens. And of course, the users need to know that.
Yeah, good, great points there. Hey, I'm going to mix it up a little. We still have more questions coming over. We're going to kind of weave these in. I'm going to ask all three of you a question, if you don't mind. And this is a multiple choice. You can answer yes, no, or depends. And then we'll come back to you and then you can quantify it. How about that? So we talked about ransomware. We talked about the high rates of ransom payouts and stuff. So Is there ever a time that an organization should pay the ransom? Yes, no, or depends? Go ahead, Kim.
I knew you were going to ask me first. It depends. Honestly, I think it depends. I can quantify it when you come back to me, but
Okay, we'll come back. John?
I would also say it depends.
Okay. Tina?
Yes. Yes.
You say yes, you should pay the ransom.
Yeah.
Tell us why. We're curious.
If somebody has their life on the line, if there's a life on the line, you got to pay. Yeah. And I don't believe in paying, but I think that there are extenuating circumstances where they will pay, and we know that they're paying. We know insurance companies are paying, and that's why they're paying. They're paying because there's critical infrastructure involved. There are people involved. There are lives involved. We just saw a life be lost in this situation. Now, I know as well as you do that when we pay, we encourage this to continue. Don't get me wrong. I don't like to negotiate with bad guys, and I don't like to encourage them. But until we get better at protecting ourselves and getting out of these things, we have to find a way. Used to be that we'd say, okay, just back yourself up and then you can tell them to go pound sand. Well, now we have double extortion. So that's not going to work. So in the case of that, where there is a life that can be lost, yes, I believe we should do everything we possibly can to save the life.
Excellent. Good response there. Actually, all your responses are good. Did either John or Kim want to add a qualifier in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention in there, the FBI will tell you absolutely do not pay. That's their recommendation. Because what they don't want to do is they don't want to validate that ransomware is a good way to make money. Yeah. Unfortunately, that ship has sailed. They're already making money. We're seeing the fact that it's continuing to grow. It's a huge industry. It's responsible for over 75% of the payouts from a cybersecurity perspective point of view, or a cyber insurance point of view. So we know that it's definitely there. Sometimes when we're dealing with that, we have to recognize, is 21 days being down better? Or is it better to just be down a few days, pay the ransom and get it back? Now, remember, there's no guarantee. You could pay that ransom and your data could still be unavailable to you. And the other option is as we know, the threats continue to evolve. It's not just encrypting your data or making your data unavailable anymore. It's actually now extorting you because they have your data. So it's one of those ways where they now, if you may pay them off, but they still have your data. And they may have given you access to it again, but your secrets are out there. And we saw that happen, with the game vendor, that their data is, they lost all the intellectual property and everything else. It's all out there in the open internet. So paying may be an option. I would never take it off the table, but it is certainly better to not be a victim.
Yeah, I think Tina put kind of my depends out there, which is critical infrastructure and human impact. We have it. This is no longer all right, 20,000 records got breached and data was leaked. This is patient mortality rates. This is gas shortages. This is food shortages. This is electricity outages. This is, and I'm one of those people, you can get me really going on warfare and all, nation states and things, right? But Russia went after Ukraine this way. Right, actually took down their systems. And so the more pressurized and immediate human impact of these attacks, I think we have to consider how to get out of them. Ideally, you're right, we don't want to pay. I kind of look at this though as like we're in the Wild West at this point in terms of law enforcement and policing. It's like all of a sudden we have, FBI and CIA are on this. And it's not all of a sudden, I shouldn't say that. They've been involved, but it's like the world woke up to ransomware. And I was looking at the Hollywood Presbyterian case that was from 2016. So this has been going on and it's been happening a very long time. And there's studies out there that there's direct human impact. So that's where I think until we get a better handle on it and better response, there aren't guarantees and there isn't anything saying, if you pay, but like you said, John, 21 days. What is the cost? The human cost is what you have to start thinking about. And I think it depends on the ransomware. It depends on the data, the impact. But to say don't pay, I think is too cold and too black and white, the situation that we're currently facing.
Yeah, excellent comments there. We talked a little bit before about the cloud, and I wanted to jump up to the cloud, go up 10,000 feet or wherever the clouds are at there, just to kind of get your thoughts on this a little bit, because backup is not exactly preventing a ransomware attack. And there's a lot of misconceptions on that, but we don't want to kind of poo-poo the backup idea, because backups are important. Backups are important just fundamentally in a business, and people don't back up their data. We know that for a fact. And I think it was one of you, maybe it was Kim or somebody mentioned before, I thought was interesting about backups. Sometimes the backups don't work. And I think one statistic I read was almost 30% of people that have backups, when they resort to the backup and try to get it to work, it doesn't work. And they go, oh no, now what are we going to do? That's scary when you think about it. So having, I think, a regular backup plan done properly is fundamental. But now we blend in there the cloud a little bit. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. Well, should we back up our data? We know the answer is yes. Should we back it up on the cloud? And what are some basic tips you can share with this audience that will help them? Again, remember, we're talking to CISOs and other business owners here in attendance that will help them regarding a disciplined backup plan. Does anyone want to start? Maybe John, you want to start on that?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, on the cloud side, it's, with so many organizations moving to the cloud, it's very, very popular. It's scalable. It's one of those things where it makes economic sense. You can provide some excellent disaster recovery from any kind of natural occurrence. But at the same time, backing up to the cloud is very important as well. You can have an offsite backup. You don't have to worry about a flood getting at it. You don't have to worry about any other type of natural disaster destroying it if it's properly protected in the cloud. Now, the key there is properly protected. So one of the things to remember is when you're a victim of ransomware, it's entirely possible that they've compromised your cloud network. So your cloud is not necessarily untouchable. If anything, it is an environment as part of your production environment, your production network, and you have to take the appropriate precautions. Now, major cloud providers already have solutions there to provide a offline backup. This is a backup that is basically write once from the application, and then it's locked away so that even malware can't get to it. Now, that's critical because then that data can be secured. Now, of course, you want to make sure that your accounts that do have access to that data are also appropriately secured. As we all know, as security folks, MFA is number one. You have to have MFA. Even bad MFA is better than no MFA. So please just do it. Don't fight it. Don't take no from the CEO. You have to do it. He has to do it. He's the biggest target that has to be protecting that data. Now, once we have the data up in the cloud, you mentioned there are about 30% of the backups that are not recoverable. This is extremely common. What happens is everyone's in a hurry. They put their application out there. They've got it running and they're saying, great, we got our application in the cloud. There's our production. Nobody thought about the backup. Or if they thought about the backup, well, they're only backing up half the database. They didn't realize that when they added those other extents, that those weren't included in the backup, or when they added those other directories, they weren't included. So it's important that you have the processes in place to ensure that you have a complete backup. And then I believe Kimberly mentioned testing your backups. A lot of companies, and this is a very smart thing to do for years, is you need to test your backups. You need to go out and periodically say, okay, let's pretend database number A went down today and we need to restore it. Can we restore it? Try it. Spend the time on it, because the last thing you want to do is get into an event where you need that backup and you find out it doesn't work. Then you're in trouble. So the cloud providers have the offline solution for the immutable backups. Take advantage of that. You can snapshot your virtual machines. You don't even have to take downtime. You can automate all this, automate those tools in place, automate your backup tools so that they're grabbing the entire environment. Then if somebody does add something that they didn't put in change control, you're still covered. You want to make sure that you're working intelligently. So automation is the key, immutable backups.
Good point there. And I think that is key. When you can automate it, I always say when it becomes a pattern, and we all brush our teeth, hopefully we brush our teeth every day. Do you back up your data every day? That should be a
Yes.
pattern, right? That way you have something that you can turn to. Because otherwise, when you have nothing else to turn to, where do you turn when you are a victim of ransomware? And that kind of is a nice segue for this next question. Cybersecurity insurance or not? Again, maybe we could put it out there to each of you. Should a small business or an enterprise, should you have cybersecurity insurance? Tina, what do you think?
It depends. It depends on the size of the company and their risk. As with any insurance, sometimes it makes perfect sense. I happen to be single and I have no children, and my resources are okay, so I don't need life insurance. Now, the life insurance people would love to argue with me about that. You have to look at your situation and then make a decision about insurance. My thought is on any business with any kind of sizable risk, yes, you need cyber insurance. Now, will it protect you in total? No. They're very smart. They're not going to, the loopholes and the deductibles and it's just not going to do it. It's not there yet. And when it does protect you, it's just, well, you'll see for yourself. You should always be investigating it because it's going to evolve. As with any risk that you have for your business, whether it be a risk of a flood, as John mentioned, a flood coming in, a hurricane, an earthquake, you have to be prepared for this type of risk as well. And some people really need it. So I would say, yes, definitely investigate cyber insurance. I'm very encouraged by the fact that they are beginning to add things like multi-factor authentication. Been trying to get them to consider zero trust because I think that that's so important as well to consider. Am I trying to make insurance harder for all the businesses out there? No, because once again, zero trust is nothing more than locking down the front door so that you don't have a way where everybody is automatically trusted. Businesses used to do that. We used to be able to do that on our WAN. We knew everybody, but now the credentials are so easy to steal. You need to do a better job of locking your front door and then making sure contextually the people that say they are who they are really who they are. And so things like that have to be considered. And I would like them to give you a discount for it, right? If you have a Ring doorbell, you get a discount on your home insurance, right? Why shouldn't you get a little bit of a break on the cyber insurance, perhaps?
Good points there, I think. And so it's really weighing and balancing what you're protecting and what your risk model is there. Excellent points. Did either Kim or John have additional point? Please, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things I was noticing with cybersecurity insurance is that, a lot of the companies, the cyber insurance companies, when an event occurs, they just pay the ransom. That's the easiest way out for them.
Yes.
So it's a double-edged sword, though, because what it means now is when you have cyber insurance, now the perpetrators look at it and say, let's go to that guy because he's got insurance. Yeah. So when you sign up for insurance, you almost make yourself a mark. So be careful. It does depend on your positions, what you're protecting and what your needs are. The other thing worth noting is that the costs are continuing to rise phenomenally. The rates are up over 40% right now. So it is one of the things where that industry is feeling the pain because of the increased risk. So you might want to go that route if you if you have to. I wouldn't say absolutely, but if you have to. But at the same time, understand that you need to have the compensating controls to protect you. And I think the companies that are providing that cyber insurance are also going to be looking much more closer at your controls that you have in place and the protection levels, the risk levels. Because if you're not adequately protecting their environment, you may not be able to get cyber insurance. It may not be an option for you. So you have to be responsible about it and work with them in a team effort. It is definitely a growing area of concern.
And I will echo that. I think I'm like, Tina, I don't love regulation. It creates compelling events in the market sometimes. But I do see them. It's interesting that cyber insurance is starting to push to say you have to have you have to have these controls in place. And I think that's actually a potentially benefit for them, right? In so many ways, but it should also benefit organizations in terms of using it. I do think that look at the policy. I've heard more often than not, it didn't cover XYZ when we needed it to.
Yes.
Is a big challenge that I think they haven't quite figured out, and we have to do the due diligence on. And then in terms of the cyber insurance provider and also backup providers and everything, please do third-party risk assessments on a continuous basis. That was my bread and butter that I used to work in at a previous company. I can't tell you how many people send a SIG questionnaire that's 1,400 questions, get it filled out once a year, if that, and they only do it on critical vendors. And so you have to be assessing risk of your third parties, and that goes to your cyber insurer because, John, as you mentioned, they're figuring out, oh, this company X has a great big policy that can pay us out, and they go after company X. And so the only way to start preventing that is to start all community-wise aggregating and saying, okay, well, Mr. Cyber Insurance Company, what is your controls that you have in place? And what are you doing to protect me? And same thing with your backup provider. And vendors like us, we have to be SOC compliant. We have to have those controls in place to be responsible as well. And so I think that's the other thing is really make sure you know who you're getting it from and what it's going to cover. And expect that if you have it, by the way, everybody go check. If you have it, please go check your renewal because they're starting to say we're not renewing you if you don't have multi-factor, for example, and or your premium is going to be increased by maybe 100%. So check your renewal dates, be prepared. You don't want to get caught on a January 1st renewal and say, I just don't have the controls in place. It's going to be a bad situation.
Yeah, one of the things too that I just wanted to mention regarding this is a lot of companies, they filled out an attestation when they signed on for this insurance. And a lot of them, MFA, oh yeah, I used MFA this morning when I went in through my VPN. So they tick MFA. That, unfortunately, when the cybersecurity says, well, wait a minute, how did somebody gain access to your critical database? Well, I don't have MFA on it. You can be denied on that claim because you basically falsified that attestation. And remember, those attestations are being done at the C-level. So it's one of those things where an IT guy may just say, oh yeah, we have MFA, but the C-level, you need to make sure as a CISO that you are protecting your organization. It's not good enough to just accept it. You need to be from Missouri and say, show me we have MFA.
That's a really good point there. I think the other thing is looking at the big picture with cybersecurity insurance, there is one positive benefit that it does discipline you. I think if they come in, it tells you you got to, cross your T's, dot your I's, and be in compliance of these things. I contrast it if we're familiar with PCI compliance, if you're accepting credit cards and things like that. Too many people over the phone and you can check the box. Sure, yeah, yes, of course I shred all my documents. And they're like, great. But do companies really do it? So if you're going to get cybersecurity insurance, don't look at that as the magic bullet. If something really tragic happens, that it solves the problem, because it probably won't if you're not in compliance, but use it as an opportunity to kind of mitigate some of the risk and implement best cybersecurity practices and education. So you actually will be stronger. You don't want to ever put a claim in. And the fact that, as you guys were mentioning, if you do put a claim in, it may not be honored. So you got to balance that out. But most importantly, do what you can do that are in your controls to keep your information safe. I think that's really imperative. And we're starting to hear insurance companies that have active clients are starting to not just deny claims, but they're not taking on, they're not renewing clients, they're not paying out for ransomware. And don't forget, they also negotiate the ransom payout. So if somebody's demanding you pay $100,000, by the time the insurance company gets in there, they may only pay $10,000 in Bitcoin that they happen to have on the side. So we have to be careful and make sure we're using a reputable cyber security insurer and read the policy, understand it, and they're providing that education. I think that's really, really important. And you guys make some great points there. For a moment, I want to get your thoughts looking at the wide landscape of ransomware. And we see attacks happening pretty much everywhere. Some are more concerning than others. Do any of you have any thoughts? what area seems to be the focus that you hear about more so, where they're targeting? What verticals, what areas, and what concerns you the most?
So
Healthcare. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, so one of the things that is out there, like Tina just mentioned, healthcare is huge, but the public sector, you find a lot of places that are, we see many cities and governments, local governments being hit because budgets are low. They're being very constrained with the tools they have. They can't necessarily pay top dollar for the professionals that they need. As a result, they are not necessarily patched. They're not necessarily controlled. They don't have the same regulatory scrutiny that some of the other organizations have. And so these organizations are prime targets for this type of thing. Education is another area as well, where it's being hit hard. So healthcare, education, public sector.
Well, I'm going to build on that a little bit. And I'm going to say, when you talk about the public sector, John, which is excellent, let's talk about smart cities for a minute, okay, and IoT. All right, those devices are absolutely one of the places for the future. And this is about the future of ransomware, the session where, many experts see that you're going to see additional breaks, that's where you will see additional ransomware hits in these smart city locations. They're going to get in that way, and then they're going to provide entry points for ransomware hits that way. So I think we have to be very, very careful about all these little devices and how we update them, how we control them, how we segment them on the network. It's very key. How they talk to one another, how they talk to our databases. I think you need experts like John on your staff to help you get this right, because if it isn't done properly, it's a big attack surface you have in hand.
Yeah, I would just basically echo both of you, but critical infrastructure is my, like I said, I can get started on crazy war talk, but it's legitimate in the sense
It is.
We are so, I keep going back, people, I always talk about my Uber driver. I just went to a conference in July. I was like, have you heard that ransomware stuff? It's like, yes, of course. But people are trying to be more aware of it. And I think people are surprised. And it's like, wait a minute, we love convenience and we love easy access and we like things delivered our door in 2 hours and we like data and and so we've sacrificed security as convenient, right, for convenience. And so where they're targeting and what they're doing is kind of everywhere, because we've built this into how we engage with everything we do. And COVID just blew it up, right? COVID just completely amplified and put gasoline on that fire. Now, I actually, if you'd asked me before, I would have said, healthcare, I've seen some targeted attacks and other things. I think it's anyone. And I want to say that because the mentality I've heard for a decade now is it won't be me. I talk to counties all the time and they're like, yeah, the big guys have and need, these controls, but we're so little, or we're not, we have what we've had forever. It's good enough. And those statements just, they don't cut it anymore, right? They're just not, it's not enough anymore. And so just the basic future of where this is going is this is going to be day to day. Scott, what was it? 4,000 per day or something?
Yeah, in the US.
Yes.
They're not discriminating. They're not saying, oh, we're just going to go after healthcare because PHI is super valuable, or we're just going to go after, no, it's everywhere because we're all connected. We're all conveniently connected. And so now when they infiltrate even the small ones, utilities, we've seen utilities taken out by the small service station sitting out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And so that's the point is I actually don't know if I would pinpoint an area. I think the cases that make the news are highlighting and bringing awareness to it, but definitely don't want to give the false perception of people that like, well, we're not Colonial Pipeline. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. So I think that's the big thing that I would point out is just realize please don't have the mentality of it's not going to happen to us, right? The if versus when we've been saying for quite a while, and it's coming true, and it is true. So.
Yeah, so true. I wanted to see if we can get maybe a forward-thinking thought from each of you, kind of in closing remarks there. Any final things you want to say? and certainly share some of the stuff, exciting stuff you're doing in your respective companies in your concluding comments. If somebody wants to weave in a little bit about double extortion too, we talked about it, touched it. They may not know about it, the audience, fully, because that is a little bit newer. We hear about ransomware, very traditional, but not double extortion. So feel free to weave that in. So maybe in concluding comments there, maybe we'll start. Tina, do you want to start there and just share just a couple thoughts? Where from your perspective and Appgate looking forward, where is the future of ransomware?
Well, it's definitely, I think what's going to happen is that big companies and small are going to start getting smarter. We pray, and start following the practices that we recommend, just as they followed the practices of OSHA, slip and fall. We're afraid, we're going to put signs up so people don't slip and fall. They're going to start following some basic practices. We pray. And locking the front doors and so forth. That's what I hope. And then they'll start coming back to us through our mobile phones, through our smart cars. Probably we'll get a ransomware. We'll shut down the Tesla, and we'll, I hate to say it, but it'll start being back to the consumers again, like it was at the beginning. I mean, let's face it. It started with us, and it'll be back to us. This won't end. And then they'll get smart and they'll start doing something else. But I do pray that our the businesses will find a way to see to it that this becomes part of the daily life of working, and that they become protective of their business in a way, just like they don't put their money from the cash register out on the counter, right? That's what I pray. And as far as double extortion, all they're saying is, they're taking your data and then they're encrypting it and not giving it back to you. That's one thing that they do. And the double is they're actually taking the data and then they're putting it out into the dark web. That's after they've said to you that they're not going to give it back. They're actually then sharing it with the world. So that's kind of what they mean by double. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. My technologist friends here are going to give you a much deeper, better explanation. But for somebody that's never heard that before, that's the simple way to explain it.
Oh, well said. You can't trust a thief. That's
right.
For sure. And they find other ways. They'll exfiltrate the data there, hold that near and dear to them. You don't pay or you do pay, then they could always use that data against you. Yeah, excellent. Maybe some of your thoughts there, John, if you're thinking forward to the future of ransomware.
Yeah, just a comment too on the double extortion. There's also triple and quadruple extortion. So, when they got your data, the next thing you know, they're going to DDoS you. And then the next thing you know, the quadruple is they're going to talk to your clients, because that's a way they can do that. So it is evolving. It's getting worse. Mm-hmm. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. A couple of things to keep in mind is IoT, very huge risk. These systems are not patched. These systems are thrown together. They're productionized. They're sent out. They're never thought of again. Your Ring camera, for instance, or your smart thermostat. All of these devices need to be separate. Companies have time clocks right now that they have installed on their networks. These time clocks for people coming in and out, they're Android based. They're sent out there. They're not patched or anything else. People have them on their production network. These devices get compromised, then they use it to compromise the rest of your network. So definitely segment your network. We know that you need to know your assets. Look at what's on your network. Know what's on your network. If you can't figure that out, you need to get some help to figure that out, because you can't watch what you don't know. So make sure that you know what your attack surface looks like. These threats are going to continue. They're going to get smarter. They're going to get better. You mentioned smart cars. They're already being compromised. Those are things that people are looking at doing to do very nefarious activities. So we have to think about it. Sometimes it's not just monetary. There are other things that they can do there. Protect it. Make sure you've got good process, procedure around them. Train your users. Make sure security is not done in a vacuum. Everybody in the company has to know. I always like with backups, and I think of those as kind of like the janitor of the building. The janitor comes in that building, he has keys to every room in that building. He can get to any place. And he's the only guy there that nobody did a background check on. And so, unfortunately, you need to be thinking like a criminal, and you need to be thinking, how would I get into this organization? What's the best way? If you put your dungarees on and go in there as the janitor, you'd be surprised the access you can get versus dressing up in a suit and going in as the CTO. You will be surprised what you can get. So with regard to that, you need to be looking at all these low-level attack surfaces, making sure that you're protecting every element from the most simplest elements. DNS is one of the very popular ones today. Looking at those systems, making sure that they're protected as well. And if, again, these are things that might be out of the scope of most IT organizations. So if you do need the help, either train your people, invest in that training, or get professional external resources that can help you to identify, harden, and remediate these things. And that way you'll be at least ahead of the curve for now, and then periodically followed up with pen tests and yearly evaluations to make sure that you're keeping on top of it, because they're not going to rest. So you can't push the easy button and expect it to go away.
Yeah, good points. Your final thoughts there, Kim, again, thinking about the future of ransomware?
Yeah, mine's a little different. I especially with this lawsuit just coming out, I think that the days of data breaches and cyber being the issue, the revenue, reputational damage, brand damages, competitive impact is going to be significant and will continue to be more significant. I also am hoping, I'm a self-sovereign identity person, if anybody knows, but I really think we're getting to a point where everyday people that we do business with, either as our employees or our citizens or our customers, are going to start caring and going to want ownership over things like their identities, consents, understanding how their information is being used and everything. And so now we'll all personally start taking ownership of. That's actually a day I'm looking forward to, versus companies being, trapped kind of to be responsible. In terms of closing remarks, one thing I've noticed is I eat, sleep, breathe this. I'm sure everybody on this panel does. There are CISOs, whether you have the title and you've had it forever, or you've just started. There's a lot of just started out there, believe it or not, right? Like I've had a CIO come to me and he's like, oh my gosh, they just told me yesterday I'm a CISO, right? And has no clue. My best advice, because I think there's at least 350 IAM vendors like we are right out there. We're unique. I'm not, again, no commercial pitches, but uniqueness. There's a sea of vendors. There's a sea of information. What I would say is start somewhere. Start somewhere, because like Zero Trust, I think, Tina, you'll say it's a journey. You don't just become secure everywhere. Don't trust anything, verify it all overnight. Start somewhere. And if it's just putting MFA in one spot, put it in one spot. If it's getting your security policy buttoned up, button up your security policy. But you have to start, because the thing is, it's a strategic project. Strategic projects are overwhelming if you try to build the whole house at once. You got to start with foundational elements and build it up from there. And so I think people get kind of paralyzed, right? Like analysis paralysis. And then the last thing I'll say is, please don't sacrifice on your security priorities and program for vendors. Please stop doing that. What I see all the time is we come up to customers and they have 6 solutions that overlap and do the same thing and cost them a fortune, and the team's not there to integrate. And what's happened is, oh, this vendor offered us this for free. It's an easy authenticator app. We'll put it in place. Now we need to secure our infrastructure, which was part of our plan. We didn't ask them about that. So now we have another multi-factor vendor, or we have another SSO solution. And so we've seen 5, 6, 7 just IAM vendors. I've heard upwards of 80 security solutions. And a lot of that is because we influence, right? I'm a vendor, we influence you, but also you don't have a plan going in. So have your plan, stick to your guns, and please start somewhere. And by the way, vendor or not, I'm one of those people, I'll talk about it all day. I don't want to sell you, like, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm sure John, Tina, Scott, we're all the same way. We're very passionate about it. If you want advice, there's groups out there, there's communities out there, but don't be afraid to ask those questions and stick to your guns. So
Excellent comments there. And I think just in closing from my standpoint, thinking about the future of ransomware, I tend to look up to the heavens. I'm thinking about satellites. That's what scares me at the end of the day. There's close to 10,000 low Earth orbiting satellites out there, everyone from Elon Musk to Amazon to you name it. There's billions and billions of dollars out there. There's more than 3,000 of them that are just kind of classified as space junk that are floating around. But if I was a hacker, I'd be targeting the ground stations here on Earth to disrupt the communication with space. And now you're taking out, in the not too distant future, our internet, our communication, our TV, our GPS, everything's gone. So not to sound gloom and doom, but that's probably the future of ransomware, where we're going to see some of these scary ransoms. So again, we really thank this distinguished panel here. Again, Tina Gravel, SVP of Global Channels and Alliances at Appgate, Kimberly Johnson, the VP of Product at BioKey, and John McWilliams, the virtual CTO at CMIT Solutions. Please check out their bios, connect with them on LinkedIn, have conversations after this discussion closes, and get more questions answered. We're all here to answer your questions. And now we'll take a few more minutes in closing there and kind of turn it back to FutureCon. And if there's any other questions, we'll entertain.